We're going to be joined by John and Corinne here in a sec, just waiting for them to get on. Hey, John. Hey, Corinne. Thanks for joining
Hello.
today.
Thank
Hey
you for
all.
having us. It's a pleasure.
It's so good to see so many people. I see some familiar names here. Good to see you again.
Yeah. I'm excited to, bring us this second Q&A on the Discord server. Last time we were really, really happy with the way it turned out and how everyone seemed to really enjoy it. So we're back again. Thank you for submitting your questions on the Ask BioWare channel. I am going to start and kick that off in just a second. But for those of you who might be new here, I'm the community manager, and I'm going to let Corinne and John introduce themselves as well.
Hey all,
Oh,
I'm Corinne Buche, game director on Dragon Age the Veilguard. I just generally help people on the team do cool things and create this world.
and I'm John Epler, the creative director on Dragon Age the Veilguard, and Bryn picked probably the best way to describe what I do too, so I'm just going to steal that. There to make sure the team can is enabled to do their best work, and I'm super excited to share all this with you.
Awesome. Yeah, before we start, I also want to give a quick heads up. You might have seen it in announcements, but there are a couple of questions in here that we have answers to that we would consider minor spoilers. I'll give a heads up before that minor spoiler answer is given, or even the question is read. So you can go, grab some water, or go outside for a second, or just do anything to decide if you want to listen to the answer or not. But I promise these spoilers are, we'll call them out before we say anything.
That
Um,
is kind of the coolest part of this session. We're getting closer to launch now, so I think we can go a little bit deeper on some of the questions this time.
yes, no, this is so exciting. Okay, are you guys ready?
Yes, yes, I am.
Let's do
Let's.
it.
Okay, next one. So we know that we can hug a son, but will we be able to hug any of our companions?
So you can't hug your companions at all times. There's not an option to just walk up and give them a hug. They've got their boundaries, they've got their preferences, but there are opportunities and conversations and dialogue and scenes where you will. A companion may ask you for a hug because they're having a rough time, and you are able to give it to them.
And will there be a lot of politicking involved? And by politicking, they mean quests like Wicked Eyes and Wicked Hearts.
Yeah, so I mean, there's not going to be a quest quite like the Halam Shral Ball. I mean, that was very specifically the Inquisitor. The Inquisitor was trying to gain favor with a bunch of different factions. They were trying to form an army. Rook's struggle and Rook's honestly challenge is much more immediate and visceral. That said, it's Dragon Age. It wouldn't be Dragon Age with the word politics. You'll have influence on the things that are happening in the fate of nations, are happening around the world. And Rook, I mean, throughout the game, across this adventure, Rook does become a fairly important figure. So it's natural that you'll have some influence and some involvement with the affairs of the different factions and nations.
Gotcha. So this next question comes from Onomatopoeia. I know this has been asked before, but they didn't see an answer for it. Is there a way to toggle off nudity in sex scenes?
Yeah, let me take this one. It's so funny, John. You get the fun questions. I get the thirsty nudity questions. I'm here for it. Let me answer and maybe elaborate. Um, so there is a toggle for on and off nudity. That is one of the settings we have, and we'll be going deeper into settings and accessibility and things like that as we get a little bit closer to launch. But let me also expand on this. So when you're in Character Creator, you'll actually be able to select what underclothes your rook wears and whether that exposes your chest or your breast. So by default, nudity is on. Chest or breasts, that is up to you by your underclothing that you select, particularly as you get into, say, romance scenes. But at any point, you can toggle the setting to be non nudity and it will overwrite your undergarments.
Gotcha. This question comes from Dark Goddess Eris. What are the companions' ages? That was a question that actually came up a bunch, so I'm excited for somebody to be able to answer this one.
Yeah, I can take this one. So the companions in the Veilguard range anywhere from kind of early mid 20s, with Tosh at the youngest, all the way up to Emmerich, who is in his early 50s. The rest of the companions tend to be in their late 20s, early 30s. Again, though, they're all experts in their field. They're all people who have been through a lot. So even at the ones that are at the younger end of the age spectrum, their experience, they've been through a tremendous amount by this point, by the time you meet them. So, yeah, so I mean, I guess Tosh is the closest to Sarah at early 20s, but they're all in kind of that age range. So,
This next question I'll pitch to Corinne. How linear is the quest experience? Are there going to be side quests that you can stumble upon and resolve within areas, or are you locked into a golden path?
This is such a good one. Yeah, a lot of people have been asking about this, so thank you to whoever submitted it. So the content in the game is a mix of directed, kind of like story quest missions, and then explorable content, or you might say optional content. I don't even like calling it side content because it's a lot of fun. It's really good content. Um, so to give you an idea, a lot of the main story quests or critical path missions, if we want to call it that, they're very highly crafted. They're more linear than some of the other parts of the game because we feel that's how we can tell the best stories, give you a very intentionally paced experience, with lulls and climaxes, so it really hits you. But that's only part of it. Uh, you're also going to fully explore a bunch of the locations in the Veilguard. So, like, let me just lay a few on you. Arlithan Forest, Hosberg Wetlands. Those are probably two of the biggest ones. The Crossroads. Now, we've seen Crossroads before in Trespasser, but this isn't necessarily the Crossroads as you remember it. So you'll be able to explore this part of the Crossroads. And as you're there, you're absolutely going to be discovering new areas, new quests, mysteries, and new challenges. So, exploration in the game is absolutely about player agency in these larger, less linear levels. And it's really an important part of the overall experience and core to our design. Um, Now, as a player, and I'm just speaking for me personally, I'm the kind of player that wants to 100% every area. I want to go find all the optional quests, all the treasures. I want to see that big 100% completed on my map. That's going to take you quite a bit of time. So hopefully that answers the question. It is both.
I think that's a great answer. Thanks, Corinne. This next one is from a user named Benedictus. Will we ever get the Venatori gear?
Yeah,
uh,
I can take that one as well. Venatori gear. So like I'm assuming what we mean is for to like wear on Rook or our companions. Gosh, y'all, I'm gonna be honest. We really, really tried on that one. Hopefully you've seen in the videos our cloth sim, our hair sim. I think it's quite beautiful. The Venatori gear, generally we couldn't make that work to the quality we'd expect within combat. So no, you can't get most of the Venatori gear. But I will say there is a unique Venatori themed helmet. I don't want to spoil what that is exactly, but so you can get a helmet. It is unique. It's pretty interesting and ties into some of the events that can happen in the game. But I'm just gonna leave it there.
And this question is just for fun. So we're past a spoiler. We'll get back into other spoilers in a bit. Um, but this one's just for fun. We have so many cute, silly bird videos on the internet. Lucanus's ninth dagger, by the way, says that birds are their favorite animal. If you could just snap your fingers and a bird Easter egg would be added for Asan, what would it be?
oh, that's a good question. So actually, I'm going to cheat because I'm trying to think of bird memes or bird videos specifically, and I'm having a hard time. But The thing about griffins is they're half bird and also half lion. So I'm gonna go with the cat meme. Say my favorite meme, and this is one that still brings me joy years after it came out, is the video of the cat grooving to the guy playing Finnish polka on the drum. Again, years old. That's one of my favorite videos on the internet. So, if we're gonna give a song any kind of Easter egg, it'd be that one.
I love
You
that
know,
one.
don't judge me on this. You're putting me on the spot here, but the only thing I can picture in my head, y'all remember that video a few years back where the kid unleashes the rabbit into the field and then immediately that hawk comes down and snatches it up?
Yes.
Don't judge me, y'all. Don't judge me. But that's where my head goes. The
Oh man,
song's just getting a
I
little
love that.
treat.
I love
That's a
it.
great answer, Corinne. Fantastic.
Backing away from spoilers for a quick second, I'm going to ask this question to Corinne. With only 2 companions per party, as a Nightmare Mode player, how can we balance not having a warrior in the team to tank? Will higher difficulty players be forced to bring Davrin or Tosh for a melee instead of bringing the characters that we want?
Oh, super good. I was hoping this would come up, especially after we released the combat deep dive for Warrior trailer. Hopefully y'all enjoyed that. Um, so let me start by telling you what's happening under the hood. Well, first of all, I'm not going to bury the lead. You're not going to have to bring a tank if you don't want to. But let me first tell you what's happening under the hood. This is going to be kind of high level. Maybe we can go a little bit deeper when we have more time. Um, Behind the scenes, when you walk into an enemy encounter, we generally know how much pressure or you could say intensity or aggression we want to be putting on Rook to maintain that satisfying moment to moment experience. So, to give you an idea of some of the levers we have for each encounter, that is the number of enemies that could be specifically focused on you versus your companions, how many enemies can be attacking at once. And even when you have multiple enemies coming at Rook, we have a ticketing system. And what that means is each enemy basically knows when it is allowed to attack or not. So I tell you all that because basically when we're looking at the different types of classes and team compositions, those levers exist underneath the hood so that we give you the most autonomy and flexibility, but also maintain that pressure, that engagement for you, the player. Um, so a couple of other things on that. Now that you kind of get a sense of like what's happening under the hood, it is absolutely beneficial, but not required, to have one of each class in your party. We did go into this with the goal of giving players more flexibility than perhaps we've seen in past entries. It's just a different approach. What we know is that players tend to get very attached to certain characters. Uh, if you've got your favorites, you oftentimes want to bring them with you. Or if you're romancing a character, sometimes it's a feel bad to feel like you have to leave them behind because maybe they're the same class as you. So the whole game is built and balanced around flexibility and giving you the agency. So you can be successful, you can mix it up, but you got to plan for it. So, what do I mean by that? If you're not using teamwork, if you're not planning for your party composition, for those synergies, it's definitely not going to end super well, right? Like I've done no tank runs, uh, but it takes some foresight in the strategy here. So I'll give you an example if you don't mind. I think I've been pretty out there that my favorite class and specialization right now, could change tomorrow, is the Rogue Veil Ranger specialization. And this is very much a ranged archery based specialization. So I want to keep enemies at ranged because I want to get those well aimed critical hits, right? If those enemies are right up on top of me, I'm not going to be able to do that. So if I don't have a tank in my party, a couple of the tools that I turn to, and I have done this, in fact, my last playthrough, I did this quite a bit. Uh, I might bring Balara and use her Galvanic Tear which pulls all the enemies towards like this really cool looking gravity well and gets them off of me. I might instead use Nev's time slow. So the cool thing about this is it slows time for everything in the world except for you and your team, right? So I'm running away, I'm doing a heavy draw, getting those headshots, or making other tactical decisions. I could also turn to my rune loadout. Hopefully, y'all saw runes in the warrior combat deep dive. That's an important part, especially if you're playing on nightmare mode. The strategic and tactical options that gives you will allow you to overcome things like not having a tank. I think everyone may have saw the rune where you're doing basically an AoE freeze and freezing everything in place. So it's kind of a long-winded answer. I'm sorry. It's complicated, but point is I think you're going to have more flexibility in your build crafting and your synergies, but it's going to depend on the strategy and composition that you feel works best for you and your own preferences. And then you did mention Nightmare. Let me just finish with saying, and this is anecdotal, but in our own Nightmare playthroughs, we actually find that the most challenging aspect to plan around isn't necessarily aggro management, but making sure you have coverage on all the various elemental damage types. So I just say this for anyone planning to go into Nightmare, plan well.
Staying on the topic of combat, it was noticed during the high level combat videos that weapons and armor seem to be tied to different factions. Are there bonuses or something similar involved if Rook is a Grey Warden while using Grey Warden equipment? Are these removed if a Shadow Dragon Rook is using Grey Warden equipment?
Oh, interesting. Everyone went deep on that gameplay video. Hey, I'm glad you noticed that. Yeah, so to answer this, you're going to be working really closely with the factions in the game, right? Like the threat you're up against is a world ending threat. So you're going to interact with each of these factions. So that means you're going to get a lot of the gear that that faction tends to use. And especially the stronger you help them become, the more gear you'll have available from that faction. So when you see a piece of gear that has like the Veil Jumper icon on it, that signifies that it is aligned with that faction. But you can use it regardless of if that is your faction backstory or not. All it means is that, if I want to maybe improve it or get more gear in that vein or that looks similar, I can see it's from the Veil Jumpers. I'm going to go back to the Veil Jumper Quartermaster, and that's where I will find more items of that type or upgrade possibilities. But it also leans into the thematic identity. So, I think in that video we were using the transmog system, but if I'm using a Veil Jumper gear, like an armor, it's going to look like it was crafted by the Veil Jumpers, and it's going to lean into the mechanical themes of the Veil Jumpers as well, which just one of those themes tends to be lightning damage. Now, I will also say, and this is a little specific, but occasionally you will find gear or even like skill nodes that will occasionally um, be empowered. They'll get stronger relative to your strength with that given faction. So, like, if you find a piece of gear that's really core to your build and it strengthens the stronger the Veil Jumpers are, like, that gives you a pretty good signifier that maybe that's a faction you want to focus on. Katey, I don't know if you're still there.
Yeah.
Did we lose you?
Oh,
We may have lost Katey, y'all.
we can start just, what's the
Yeah.
word for it?
Why don't I do
Going
have the
up?
list of questions here, so why don't I ask the next one until Katey comes back? I hope everything's okay on your side, Katey. All right. Next question I see. The evoker description on the blog post highlights ice-based magic. Does that mean we will not be able to have lightning and fire-themed playstyles as the evoker? Uh, no, absolutely not. The evoker can lean into all of the elements. In fact, all mages can to a degree. Um, you probably have seen the skill trees. You're gonna pick up abilities, perks, traits of all elemental types and powering up those elements. So just because you're an evoker doesn't mean you're like pigeonholed into ice spells. What I will say is if you're heading towards that specialization, um, you're going to pass through the section of the skill tree where you're more easily going to be able to naturally pick up those ice spells, right? So it might lean towards ice, but you can expand it. The name of the game is agency here.
Corinne, why don't I ask you the question so we can still kind of do a Q&A thing?
Yeah,
I'll ask you
yeah,
the next one.
that sounds good.
Corinne, can I set the gear to look however I want without losing stats? And that is a question from Yo Call Me Rob.
All right. Well, y'all know fashion's the true end game. So we did confirm we have a full transmog system. So what I'm going to do is spend some time going a little more in depth for y'all so that we're getting new information. So yeah, if anyone's not aware, transmog basically is I have a piece of gear, but I apply a appearance to it that makes it look like something else that I like better, so I can be fabulous. Um, so how this is going to work is you're of course going to find gear as you adventure through the world, and you can equip that. But any piece of gear you find is also going to unlock the appearance for that gear. So you might find something that you really like and you want to look that way and then you replace it, anything you've already acquired, you can apply the appearance to whatever gear you want. Additionally, and this is one of my favorite parts, is you'll also find some appearance only cosmetics that are specifically used just for transmog. So sometimes these are some of the fancier or more niche pieces of gear. Maybe you end up looking like a training dummy, for instance. So you'll get these appearance datas from opening treasure chests, exploring the world, and more frequently from vendors. So look, if you're in it for fashion, check out those vendor inventories because they got you. I would also say that you can transmog your casual wear. So field wear and casual wear, fully transmogable. If you want to be plate mail while you're hanging around the lighthouse, as a mage, more power to you. And then if I were just to give you a practical example of this, like on the Blood Dragon armor, the pre-order bonus, those are cosmetics. Those are just appearance datas, right? So they're effectively evergreen. You can use them anytime you like without compromising your stat.
I will say that I don't think I've spent as much time in any other menu other than transmog because, as Corinne mentioned at the beginning of this, fashion is the true end game. So, Katey, have we got you back yet?
Am I back? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Yay.
Katey, we did our best, Katey, but I don't
Yeah.
think we were very
No,
convincing.
I think you both did a great job. It was one of those weird situations where Discord force quit, but I could still hear everything everyone was saying. I don't really know what that was
Oh,
about,
I
but
just assumed you didn't like my answer.
yeah, I rage quit actually, Corinne, and
Taken
it
by
was
the
all your fault.
face.
No, thank you for taking over while I was figuring that out. There's a non-zero chance that happens again, so just keep an eye out.
We'll keep it rolling.
Um,
Don't worry, we got you.
Thank you. So I'll just pick it up from the next question. The latest video, wow, I can't even talk anymore. The latest video series mentioned how each companion can set up or detonate specific combos. Are those always set in stone, or would we get opportunities to change it up through the skill trees or otherwise?
Cool. I eat up these really specific combat questions. Um, so first, let me give you an overview of how the primer detonator relationship works between the classes. Like, this is very nitty gritty, y'all. If this is your jam, get your pencils out. So here's the overview. Mages, and this is true of companions and rook. Mages apply weakened and overwhelmed debuffs. And those are two of the debuffs we'd call primers. Mages detonate the sundered debuff. Then if we go to rogues, rogues apply weakened and sundered debuffs, and rogues detonate overwhelmed. Warriors apply sundered and overwhelmed, and warriors detonate weakened. So you can see kind of the interesting rock, paper, scissors relationship there. And when I talk about it is beneficial to bring one of each class, it's just the inherent nature of that rock, paper, scissors relationship that I'm really thinking of. But to answer your question, that is just the baseline. Like that's the default if you don't modify it. Throughout the game, you will find opportunities, whether it's from gear, skill tree nodes, even runes, that'll allow you to break this paradigm. So when it comes to like your companion builds, again, it all comes down to the abilities you choose, what gear you're equipping them with, how you allocate your skill points. Yeah, does that answer the question? There's quite a bit of flexibility, but there is a baseline paradigm as well.
Yeah, I think that answers the question. Let's see. The next one is will we see a bit more of the lighthouse before release as well as non-combat gameplay?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll keep it brief here because we are going to be talking more about exploration in the lighthouse next month. So forgive me, but I'll say stay tuned on that one.
This next question, I'll pitch it to John. Some of our companions, like Nev, Emmerich, and Lucanus, have been in past short stories and comics, and there's also a passing resemblance to some of the old concept art from years ago. What is the process like for making a character at some point and then planning to bring them back as a companion, or were they always written or designed and intended to be companions?
All right, that's a great question, and it's actually one I'm going to go a little deep on. So, as we build a game, as we start writing companions, we see how they fit in the story, see how they fit together. Some characters have been around, and some character concepts have been around for quite some time. Others come in a little bit later in development as we realize we have a gap, something in the story that we need someone who makes sense to fill that gap, to be that character. But part of it's also just as the writers, we want to make sure that the people who are writing these companions are passionate and they're writing a character they want to write. We don't want to just say, we need X, Y, and Z, write a companion to fill these gaps. But it'll be, hey, in the story, it really doesn't make sense that we don't have somebody doing X. Is there a character we can build for that? And so, you'll see old concept art, and a lot of those concepts, a lot of those, the kind of the core of those characters remains intact. We may have changed details of them. We may have decided, okay, they were going to be X, but now Y makes a little bit more sense. Or as a writer, I'm a little bit more interested in Y, and what this particular concept speaks to me more. In terms of comics, short stories, and such, generally speaking, and this isn't universal, but generally speaking, writers are writing these short stories. In particular, it's a volunteer. We ask the team, like, hey, does anyone, we've got the short story anthology, who wants to write something for it? So writers are going to pick characters that they're passionate about, and in those cases, they tend to be their companions. So, for example, Nev, as mentioned, Nev, Emmerich, Lucanus have all shown up. Those were written by people who were passionate about those characters, and we had already intended for them to be companions. Other characters, though, I mean, and Harding is an excellent example. We create a character to fill a role. In the case of Harding, she was in Inquisition, largely to be there to kind of connect those exploration spaces together and give you a sense of the Inquisition's presence. And then we saw the fan reaction. But beyond that, Cheryl really wanted to explore Harding's arc more deeply, so she got promoted to be a companion as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's an organic process, and I mean, again, it comes down to we want to make sure that the people who are building these characters, not just the writers, but also the artists, the cinematic designers, the editors, the gameplay people are excited to build these characters. And, and actually, I'm going to go a little bit side topic on that. Balar is a great example where we knew what Balar needed to be in the story, but gameplay wise, it took a bit to kind of land on how her gameplay and her character arc and who she was melded together. Corinne's talked earlier about the companions and how they show up in gameplay. A really big thing for us on this project is making sure that the gameplay reflects the characters, their arc, and their personality as much as possible. So, Yeah, kind of a long answer to say it depends, but yeah, generally if they show up, especially in something like a short story, we've already intended for them to be a companion because those are the characters that the writers are most passionate about. So,
I love that. Apart from wanting to try different classes, what are the main incentives for multiple playthroughs now that stuff seems more overall universal to be attempted all in a single playthrough? Are there choices presented that are impactful that wildly different outcomes will come from? Wow, wow, wow. Let me start that one again. I think it's just I'm reading it straight off the sheet.
no worries.
I'll start from the top. Apart from wanting to try different classes, what are the main incentives for multiple playthroughs now that stuff seems more universal to be attempted all in a single playthrough? Are there choices that are impactful and wildly different in different outcomes and decision paths?
So I mean, there's a few incentives. One of which is, I mean, the most basic is the three classes from a gameplay perspective do play differently, and it's funny. Corinne was talking about how her favorite is the Veil Ranger, but that might change. Mine literally changes every time I start a new playthrough. I develop a new favorite class, which is the class I'm currently playing. But more generally, yeah, there are choices in the game. There are different outcomes. There's content that you will see or won't see based on choices you make, both within the critical path of the game, but also with the followers themselves. So, you're not going to see everything in a single playthrough. You're not even going to see everything necessarily in a couple of playthroughs, but you want to see how your choices have different outcomes. That's the best way to do it.
This question is I understand mages having very magical looking moves, but why do rogues and warriors also have very magical looking moves? Was making every class look like a mage a purposeful choice?
Cool, cool, cool. So it's a multi-part answer, but yes, everything we've done has been with intention towards supporting the overall player experience. So I guess the first place I'd go to answer this is from a game tuning and balance perspective. We knew that supporting multiple damage types like physical, fire, electric, etc., that was going to be an important factor in the strategic depth of the combat system, particularly as it leans into builds and the strategies you use to take on various enemies. It's not the extent of it, but it's an important part of it. So that meant that making sure the various classes in some capacity have access to some or all of these damage types. And that then means that we need to make them read visually as such on the battlefield. So the first part is about making sure you have those strategic options on the battlefield. But there is more to it than that, I'd say. We also found, and I've heard this from a lot of you, that some of our magical hybrid classes have been amongst the favorites. Um, my goodness, the discourse around Knight Enchanter.
Hmm.
So this felt like a very thematic way for us to support that goal, if that makes sense. The goal of game balance, but also leaning into the things that seem to resonate the most. If I was to just focus on the warriors out there for a minute, though, because we just released the warrior deep dive, we've actually long had a goal within the team of making them more visually interesting and impactful. We know, and I've heard from a bunch of you that warrior, it tends not to be people's first choice, but hey, any of the warrior fans out there, big props to you because I love them too. Um, so this was like our chance, really, to show what a warrior can do, to make them feel like they have a presence on the battlefield that could be as interesting as some of the other classes. But I will say, I absolutely recognize that there are those of you that, like, if you're playing a melee class, you want a pure, like, physical based warrior aesthetic, maybe something that's a little more grounded. You can generally make a build that's more physical focused if that's more your taste.
In addition to playing the first three games, what comic books or novels do you recommend reading before playing the Veilguard?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, generally speaking, one of the things we wanted to make sure with the Veilguard was that players could get into the story, understand what was going on without needing to, get into the ancillary material. I love the comics, I love the novels, I love the short stories. but they are intended to be kind of side content. One of the things that we hear loud and clear is sometimes folks don't really want that to feel like I need to have read this, I need to have seen this comic, I need to have watched this show for it to make sense. That said, I'd say the most recent comic series, is a very clear lead up to the beginning of the Veilguard. It's setting up events. It's kind of setting up, Varric and Harding's search for Solus. It sets up some of the characters that you'll see in the game. Uh, Tevinter Nights is another one. Not every. We mentioned earlier that some of the companions show up there. Beyond just the companions, there's some thematic stuff that comes out of that as well. Some things that we kind of wanted to set up when we wrote those short stories, as an idea of like giving you an idea of what the world state is, how things have changed over time. And then I'd say, more very recently, yesterday, we have the podcast, Vows and Vengeance, which is intended to give you a taste of the companions and also, again, talk about the world state of Thetis at this point, giving you kind of the lead up to weeks before the events of the Veilguard. So you do have that sense of what's going on, who are these people, and how, when I first meet them in the Veilguard, you kind of have an idea of who they are. Again, though, this is all stuff that I think enhances the experience, but it's not required. There's never going to be, we're never going to put you in a situation where a character shows up and, everyone makes a big deal out of it and you're sitting there wondering like, who is this person? Because they were introduced in other media. We always want to make sure that you understand that the only thing you need to have done to understand the Veilguard is play the Veilguard. So
Awesome. Also, yes, Vows and Vengeance is so good. So definitely, give it a chance. The first episode is out now. I think a lot of
mhm.
people in the Vows and Vengeance Discord server or Discord channel are really stoked on it. This next question, will we be able to adjust how much damage the companions do in the accessibility settings?
Yeah, so our customized difficulty and accessibility settings as well, they're more focused on how you, the player, experience the game while in control of Rook. Um, so things like enemy health, timing, things of that nature. So not in the settings, no. But uh, if you really want to be that kind of player that wants to amp up your companions, like have them do a greater share of the overall damage, there's a number of ways to accomplish this. You'll get gear that just strictly says your companions do more damage. And then there's some unique buffs we support, like Rally Party. So you as Rook can trigger this surge in your companion's ability. So again, we know how diverse the motivations are within the player base, so we wanted to make sure those tools were there for y'all.
Do we get any jealousy dialogues from any of the companions if you switch up your romance plans partway through? Are any of the romances hard locked at any point?
Yeah, so you can. I mean, there is an opportunity or there's a place in a romance where you essentially commit to it being exclusive, and we really wanted to make sure that we were very upfront about the fact that you are committing to an exclusive romance at that point. And before that, it is portrayed as you're flirting, you're kind of figuring out each other. So there's no jealousy dialogues, but there are places where you commit, and we want it to be very clear to fans. There's also going to be a place, because I think I'm reading this right, where there's a point in the story where if you haven't committed, if you haven't said like, yeah, let's I'm up for this, let's do this, where you no longer have that opportunity. We're very clear about what that point is, because again, we don't want people to be missing out on a romance and think like, I've got some time, I really want a romance now, but I've got a little, and then find out that no, in fact, you don't have any more time. So
Are class specializations locked to a particular faction, or can Rook only learn a specialization from a particular faction, like through a faction trainer?
So the specializations are a lot more thematically tied to the factions than they are as strict. You must be X faction. You must get it from this person. For example, I'll use the Veil Ranger. The Veil Ranger is all themed, as Corinne said earlier, around electricity, around the use of the veil, around the use of that kind of magic. So while they are thematically tied, there is no you must be a crow to be a spellblade, for example. And part of that's because while we do like having that connection between gameplay and roleplay, we also don't want you to feel like, well, I really wanted to be Spellblade, but I also really want to be a Grey Warden. We don't want those two things. Sometimes we want gameplay to influence narrative, but we never want you to feel restricted by one against the other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, Katie,
Uh,
can I go off script
of
really
course.
quickly? All right. So I saw someone post in chat. Okay, Polly next time though. Let me just say I cannot make promises. I cannot, but I'm with you. I'm with you.
I love it. I anytime you want to address anything that's happening in chat, by all means.
Oh shit! I didn't tell you that.
I mean, don't go too crazy.
I know.
Or this next question is from K Sarah Sarah. Will we be able to change the font size in the UI, subtitles, etc.?
I can take that one. So quick reminder, we are going to do a deeper dive as we get closer to launch on accessibility settings, but let me just answer this one. Yeah, you absolutely can. There are limits, of course. But as a fellow person who often has to squint, I'm 42, y'all. My eyes are starting to go. Uh, I can play comfortably. I suspect most players will be able to play comfortably.
Will there be a way to save characters so save characters we make so we don't have to start from scratch each time?
Heck yeah, you absolutely can. I mean, look, all of you playing Inquisition, you're still sharing your OC and your characters 10 years on. We know how much you love it. So yeah, absolutely. I do want to have some caveats here though. Um, so it's when you're in the character creator, you can import a character appearance. It's just going to be the appearance data from an existing save of yours. So when I say an existing save, just let me put a very fine point on it. That save has to be local to the machine. Remember, we're an offline game. There's no online character sharing built in. But for those of you that like your OC are very near and dear to your heart, and every time you replay, you like to have the same like character, and you've spent hours and hours and hours working on it. Yeah, you can import that.
We saw how many of you were saving screenshots of sliders in DAI, and that was not a great experience, as we're well aware. So,
Um, this next one is our companion quests going to focus on internal factors or external personal events? Like, will it be a growth in character and self-discovery, or are they firmly rooted in their sense of self and will ask for slash need help with their factions, interpersonal relationships, etc.?
so that's another great question. It's a mix of both. I mean, each companion has their own personal arc over the course of the game. You know, you go on missions with them, you solve problems with them, and the nature of those problems, it's the problems are oftentimes very external in nature. You know, something's happening that they need help with, but most of the time those problems are also tied to their own personal growth as a character. Again, we really want to make sure that players feel invested in these characters, feel invested in their stories, and we also want to show that these characters do grow over the course of the Veilguard. These aren't characters who remain completely static from moment one to the end game. These are characters who grow, and you help them grow. They're still their problem. They're still not going to like. They're not sitting there saying, "Well, Rook, you need to do everything for me," but you're intended to be the leader of this group, but also you can be their friend and help them with things that their challenges. So yeah, I mean it's a mix of both. We really just it comes down to the individual character, and there is a lot of nuance in that answer, I think, too.
And this next one from a user named Crom. Is there reactivity towards the specialization that you chose? Like some people might trust more champions, or maybe others will freak out with death callers or reapers.
Yeah, what a good question. So, in general, the reactivity is referred or reserved for things that aren't necessarily likely to change, things that can create a through line that we can keep building and building upon. So, like your faction, your lineage, your class, your choices. Um, so that keeps a consistent narrative thread with those elements, and then we can assume that thread continues from beat to beat. So the answer is no, they don't react to your specialization, but in part that's because you can full refund, you can respec at any time. You might be a death caller one moment and another specialization on the next encounter.
And this next question, you mentioned encountering companions on their own missions in the world. If I keep my party mostly the same, does that mean that I miss out on their side missions, or are they unavailable to be picked up during that time?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you have all the tools that you're not going to miss out on quests based on who's in your party. Um, how would I answer this? So there are certain plot elements that can change what quests are available to you. And in some cases, some quests that you might have in your journal can actually expire based on choices and how you advance the plot. So there are ways that quest content gets cut off or alters, but in general, you have the visibility and the tools so that you won't miss out on it. Um, I can give you a couple of examples that might be helpful. So when you meet companions out in the world, there's kind of like a couple of different ways that they can show up. In a recent playthrough, I was exploring Hossberg wetlands. It was technically for a quest that should have been more oriented toward Davrin, but I didn't have him in my party. And as I got close to the objective, he showed up with a song and helped me clear the path forward. Um, the other way this will happen, I was out in Arlathan, actually doing on my way to do a main story mission, and I get to the far reaches of Arlathan Forest, and I already knew that Tosh wanted to help me with some of the challenges of that arc. Well, Tosh is right there waiting for me. So I actually chose to instead, like, Tosh seems impatient. I'm going to actually jump on that story arc right now instead of what I intended to do. So, just some examples of the way that as you're journeying through this world, opportunities are going to show up, but they allow you just to express more agency. You're generally not going to miss them.
This next question is, where is the equator in Thetis, or the planet Thetis is on, relative to places we've explored?
Well, that is a great question. So I will say that, it's funny until I saw this question. It's not something I'd ever thought a lot about, but as I started thinking about it a little bit more deeply, based on how the climate changes across Thetis, obviously to the south are the Avar, things get a little bit more wintry. And then up north is a lot more tropical. I'd say that Thetis is a southern continent and on this world. So
Are there any main story missions that require you to use a specific companion? Kind of similar to a previous question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there are a few, yes. Again, in the warrior deep dive, I'm not gonna describe it just in case anyone, didn't want to have spoilers. You can see that a companion was required for that. However, that's the exception rather than the rule. In general, we try and give players the agency to bring who they want for these moments. There are these times where a companion, either their faction or their story arc is so closely tied or intersects with the events of a main story mission that they do become required. But it's not the standard. And then, of course, in general, if you're doing your companions' arcs, those are the moments where they're more than likely going to be required. It's
Will we
pretty
be
flexible. Like if you're worried about like every mission I go through, like am I going to have someone that is going to be mandated? Generally not.
Sorry, I almost talked over you there, Corinne. My bad. This next question is, will we be able to pause cutscenes? Will there be any kind of dialogue history to look back on if we miss what was said?
so you can pause every cutscene in the game. Obviously, life happens. Somebody, maybe your cat's. Just to use an example that definitely doesn't happen to me regularly. My cat, might be throwing up in the next room, and I need to find a way to get her off of the carpet and onto, not the carpet. So you can pause any cutscene and conversation. There is no dialogue history at the moment, unfortunately, and that's not something we did look into it, but it's just based on how the dialogue is structured and how it's built in this game. That's not something that we are going to have, unfortunately.
I saw somebody say cat vomiting is so real, and I agree. Sometimes when I'm playing games, my dog decides to do something insane. Um, so this next question is, since companions can get into relationships with each other, is there a mechanic behind which companions get together? Can a companion leave due to your world decisions? And if so, will their partners leave with them?
So I'm going to answer half this question. The other half is a spoiler that we're not going to get into right now. Companions, there is not actually a mechanic behind the companions getting together. We never wanted it to feel like a mechanical thing. And obviously, different companions are going to have different attractions. One of the fun things is as you're going through, especially if you're not flirting with one of the companions, you can see these relationships starting to develop. And the thing that actually allows them to, completely develop is generally committing to another relationship, or not engaging in a romance with those companions at all. So yeah, I mean, there's not a mechanic. It's just what we felt made the most sense, and I think that's honestly one of my favorite things with the companions is they're all written to feel like real people with real preferences and real, attractions. So beyond just romances, they also develop friendships and even rivalries with each other because of them feeling like these characters that exist outside of just the game. So
Awesome. This next question is all about Davrin. Hildrana would love to know more about Davrin. What's his personality like? What kind of hobbies or things does he like? And what his relationship with Asan is like?
Davrin is one of, I say one of my favorite characters. Honestly, I love all the seven companions, so it's challenging for me to say which. But Davrin is stern, thoughtful, and considerate. Though he has a soft side for sure. You see that develop over time as he starts to warm up to the other companions. He has, a kindness to him that is brought out in particular by certain companions, and also a strong sense of pride and when he develops rivalry with some of the companions. So there's that sense of he knows who he wants to be, he knows who he is, and a lot of his arc is making that journey. In terms of how he relates to Hassan, his relationship it evolves over time. I'm not going to get too deep into spoilers because there are spoilers in that for his quest. The other interesting thing about Davrin, and this shows up, we've talked about this before, he's a monster hunter. He's not just a warden who sees fighting monsters as, just part of the job. He believes in turning this into a skill set that he alone, he has more than anyone else, learning how to defeat monsters, learning their weaknesses, and that does show up a lot in his character arc. So
This next question actually came through our Ask box on Tumblr. So shout out the BioWare Tumblr. Um, Rose Red is asking, why do elves seem to not like wearing shoes? Is there a lore reason behind it? Are they not afraid of getting frostbite or stepping in something gross?
So the shoeless elves thing is in part it's a Dalish are very close to nature. They go around shoeless in large part to become closer to nature. It's part of their culture. It's part of who they are. But, especially, and it's not true of every Dalish clan. The Dalish are a tremendously widely spread and widely varied people. So, for example, Balara does not go around shoeless. She wears boots. She's climbing around on ancient ruins, walking through maybe a shattered or a place where alluvion shattered. It's a great way to get your feet sliced up on the hard rocks and on the hard glass. And in general, veil jumpers are a little bit more under where they go and what they do really requires a lot more care and a lot more protection. So, I mean, you'll notice in Blar's visual design, but also in the visual design of the other veil jumpers, they're very practically minded. They know that what they're doing is dangerous, and and again, not every Dalish clan goes around shoeless. So,
ZJ wants to know, do all companions have aesthetic changes when in the lighthouse and outside of the lighthouse?
Amazing. Yeah, yeah, they absolutely do. So just like Rook, each of the companions has what we refer to as their casual wear. This is how they look in their downtime, their more relaxed moments. It's definitely different from how they look headed into battle, and I'll tell you this. If Emmerich's casual wear doesn't send you, I just don't know what to tell you.
This next one, I believe we actually might have even touched on this in the first Q&A, but uh, Trev has noticed a lack of dwarves in our promotional material concerning Rook. Inquisition had them sharing facial hair options with humans. So their question is, will dwarves return to more braided, grander beards, or will the facial hair options be shared like previously?
Yeah, we did touch on this briefly, so let me go a little bit deeper. Yeah, there are some grander dwarven beards, like braids, beads woven in. It's really lovely and really thematic. And y'all have seen our strand hair, how great that looks. I think it looks just as great for the beards. And I do know we're gonna, at some point leading up to launch, we are gonna be showing some dwarf rooks. So let's see if we can't get some beard options on display there. It actually really was quite the challenge to get the physics to work with all the armor variants we have on those beards. So I'll tell you what, y'all, the team loves hearing from you. Would it be okay if I just asked in chat, could we get some love for our character art and tech anim teams? Because they put their heart and soul into making sure this would work for y'all.
It
Um,
is incredible how good the beers look. Like, and it just they did it's the work that they've done is just spectacular.
oh, y'all are too kind. And then I guess just to finish up this question, we try and let you use as many options as the character creator has for any character you want to create. So we definitely created beards in mind that are more dwarven in nature. You can use that on a Kunari if you want, or you can use a more traditional human beard on a dwarf if you want, but your options are there. Oh, y'all are lovely. Thank you so much.
So we didn't tag this next one as a minor spoiler, and I don't think that it is. But definitely want to flag it anyway. Will the solo villains have a chance at a happy ending?
Corinne, I'm going to let you do this one.
Oh my goodness, this is the question. A lot of, I mean, I thought y'all wanted the pain. Didn't you tell me you wanted the pain? That tortured romance that rips your heart out? Uh honestly though, I just wouldn't feel right about spoiling anything here. I'll just say this. I'll just say this. Trick has done a fantastic job with Solus. They always do. This is some of their best work, I think. And then I'll also say, as for myself, as the resident Solavellan shipper on the leadership team, I'm repping y'all. But that's all I'm gonna say.
That's definitely what I meant by it. Not really a spoiler, but some people might have thought that in the beginning. Okay, next question is since you can choose to be part of the same faction for most of the companions, will that give you an advantage when trying to befriend them?
So you will get some unique dialogue with the companions that are part of your own faction. The first time you meet them, they may not all know you by face, but they've at least heard of you, heard of who you are, and maybe even heard of you leaving the faction to go help Varric track down Solus. But that said, you know the faction. You don't necessarily know them as people, so they will know you, but you still have to work to earn their trust and learn. Get them, help them with their problems.
And next question is, will there be more connections between the Veilguard? Like, will we see them hanging out together without us?
Oh, I love this one. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I've said this twice already, but my favorite thing is how much the companions feel like and end up feeling like a found family. They're invested in each other's problems. They're invested in each other's successes and failures, and this manifests through a bunch of different ways: scenes, banter, even interactions in the lighthouse itself. Because one of the things that I think is important, I know Corinne also thinks is super important, these worlds, these games feel the best when they don't feel like they're there as a theme park just for you, just to exist for Rook as a protagonist. These are characters that have relationships have, things going on that don't necessarily directly involve Rook all the time. They have their own relationships, their own feelings, and we really want them to feel like their own people and feel like they do exist outside of just the sphere of Rook. So, they'll follow you're the one leading this fight, but the companions don't just exist for you.
Before I get to this next question, I do want to say that we've got about a 15-minute warning. We've got about 15 minutes left, so we'll get through as many questions as we can in that time. And with that said, our next one is, and I feel like we might have actually touched on this earlier, but keep me honest. Would it be possible to hide some of the combat UI, such as companion trackers and enemy HP bars, for even more immersion?
Yeah, good question. It's reasonably robust what you can do with your UI. So let me give you some examples. If normally when you hit an enemy, you'll see damage floaties come off of it. You want to turn those off, you can. If you want to play without, say, the mini map or the wayfinding markers, have a more organic experience, you can. Um, I challenged myself to do it was really difficult, but to do a really difficult run where I turned off my own health bar, you can do that too. And then I know one of them that a lot of people have been asking about is we do have the incoming attack indicators that just help you react. But if you're the kind of player that wants to turn those off, cut down on the noise, yeah, you can do that too. So I can't say that we support every single option you might have in mind, but it's reasonably robust.
This next one is not a spoiler, and it is actually something we confirmed a little bit earlier on in the Q&A, but it doesn't hurt to be clear. Can we freely reallocate or refund skill points?
Yeah, we've confirmed this. I'm just going to keep it brief. Yes, absolutely. Refund all, refund last, no cost. It's an entirely friendly refund system. Go experiment and then let me know what you do.
Will the game be broken down into acts or stages at all? Mainly wondering for like spoiler discussion purposes while they're all playing and wanting to talk to one another about it.
So while we don't officially within the game say this is this act, this is the next act, there are some pretty obvious narrative breakpoints where the context changes or there's events that make it clear that things are now advancing into a different stage. That's now, to be clear, that's largely around the critical path. Other content can largely be done at any time, but even there, we do unlock certain things over the course of time because, again, it maybe doesn't make narrative sense in the context of, say, an earlier act, but now, you're into Act Two, it feels a lot more meaningful and makes more sense in the world. So you can do a lot of content in any order, but the critical path is largely broken into acts.
Now, I think this next question might be the most important question we can answer. A user by the name of Doggy Snores says, "Would you please tell me happy birthday?"
Happy birthday, Doggy Snores.
Oh, happy birthday, doggy snore. I feel weird saying doggy snores. I mean, listen,
Gotta roll with it,
John,
Corinne.
John, Katie, do we want to sing? Do we want to
Nope.
sing?
Oh, we could. Oh, okay.
You can
All right.
sing.
Happy birthday
To
to.
you. Are we gonna stop now? Okay, we're
We'll
good.
I think it's
stop.
good.
We'll stop. We got to get to
I
the
think yeah.
questions.
Yeah, we do have a time limit now. All right, next question. All right, this is from Guava. Okay, I want to know the helmet situation. Back in Inquisition, there were helmets exclusive to races, and to be honest, most helmets were exclusive to humans. Will elves and humans share helmets since their head shape seems to be more similar now? And will there be Kinari helmets rather than just face paints?
Love this described as the helmet situation. Love it. Yeah, so let me describe this to you. All the helmets can be worn by all the lineages, with one big exception. The Canari still use the Vitar face paint. So each helmet has a unique look, and if you're using the Vitar variant of that instead, that too has a unique look. So you'll wear that face paint instead of the helmet. And we felt that this was just generally a good precedent following Inquisition, and really what led us to this decision is that when you see horn customization and hair customization with the horns in character creator, like we didn't want to sacrifice that aspect of it. It's just effing cool. That's all I can say about it. So yeah, the Canary will use VTAR. All the other helmets can be worn by all lineages. We've talked a lot about transmogs, so of course you can transmog them. You can hide your helmet. You can hide your helmet in certain situations. So I'd say as a situation, we're pretty happy with it.
This next question is, will we be able to tint and change the color of our armors, or do they have their default colors only?
Oh, cool. Yeah, that kind of gets back to transmog in a way. Gosh, what's the best way to answer this? I think is that each armor piece, like gear piece you have, will have bespoke colors. But for almost every single armor piece, while you can't dye them, we have created color variant cosmetics, and they're very often aligned with the various factions in the world, right? So like there's one, for instance, that has this like incredible like flowing cape. I use it all the time. There's a variant of it for each faction with different colors and logos and things of that nature. uh, so you can't die, but it really is flexible and very thematic. And then I guess going back to the Venatori armor question we had way at the beginning, while I wouldn't say they're explicitly Venatori, there are some very Venatori-like color schemes in some of the armors you'll find.
I think this might be our last minor spoiler question. So once again, you've been warned.
Hey, I just got to respond to something in comment. That somebody says, "Wait, does that mean I can't be pink?" And I'm assuming we're talking about armors. There's some pink armors. Don't worry.
Confirmed.
There's some pink.
As some of the companions come from media outside of the games, were they already chosen as companions for the game and then integrated into the additional media, or were they characters outside of the game and the team wanted to bring them in?
I think this is pretty similar to a question we answered earlier. So, I mean, again, it depends, but if they showed up, especially into Winter Nights, they were already intended to be companions at that point. So,
Are there any lineage-based surnames, or is it just based on the background?
surnames in this game are entirely based on your background choice. The reason for this is we do reference your surname in dialogue, a not inconsiderable amount, and we didn't. At a certain point, it becomes unsustainable in terms of how many different variations. So we reference it based on your surnames, or sorry, your background.
Is there any chance that we'll be getting any audio snippets of some of the companions and Rook's voice lines before release?
Well, that's the great news about the Vows and Vengeance is that each companion will show up in one of the episodes, and you will be able to hear their voice in there. So, first episode yesterday, and there's more to come.
Can we clarify? Oh, I think my Discord just went down again.
Yep,
Oh,
I can still hear
we
you.
can hear you, Katey.
Oh,
So
good. I'll just keep
yeah,
talking.
great.
Also,
Let's
sorry
do
for
it.
the F-bomb. I didn't know you could still hear me.
Hey, we've
Um,
all been there.
Cursing in our Discord, my goodness.
How
my
very
goodness,
human
how
of
dare
you.
ban me, ban me. Um, this next question is, can you clarify if Spellblade will be forced to use a dagger, or can we still use staff as a melee combat weapon?
Oh, heck yeah, let's go. You know, I was wondering if this was going to be clear in the combat video we put out. So I'll speak about mage, but this is generally true of all the classes. Uh, so they each have two weapon sets. If you've seen the character sheet, so for mage, you're going to have your staff slot, and then you're going to have the orb and dagger slot. So at any point, like even between weapon swings, you can swap to your class alternate weapon set by hitting down on the D-pad. So you're not locked down into one weapon set or the other, uh, even if you're in a given class or specialization. Now, like what I would say is that the Spellblade specialization has a lot of extra functionality and depth that like is augmented when using the Orb and Dagger. But like if I give you an anecdote of how I play, um, the staff heavy attack armor, I take this or the staff heavy attack charge. I take a trait where when I'm doing damage and playing, it's building up that heavy attack charge on my staff, even when I'm playing as my Spellblade. So I'll be just going to town with Orb and Dagger. I'll notice that my staff is fully charged. I'll swap at a convenient moment, use my heavy staff attack, blast the enemies down. And the really cool thing about it, I was telling y'all that these nightmare players, like planning around your elemental damage types, it's really great to have weapons of multiple elemental types, right? So I go up against something that's resistant to fire, I'm gonna hit down and maybe swap to my necrotic weapon.
I'm back in
Welcome
record
back.
time. Okay. Um, did we get to the next one, or was that just the Spellblade question?
Oh, that was sorry, I was geeking out too
Oh,
much,
that's okay. No, that's
Katey.
great.
We hit upon a favorite topic of mine.
That's okay. Do we think we have time for one more, or do we think it's time to wrap up?
I can go a little late. I think we could do a couple more for sure.
Okay, we do only have 3 left,
Let's
so
finish the list.
let's do it. All right, next question. Since it was mentioned that playing as an elf in the Veil Jumpers will see you see you as more of a Dalish elf, and a city elf if you play as a shadow dragon, what kind of elf would you be in the other factions?
So this is actually a really interesting question for me because I think one of the things I'd say is, well, City Elf versus Dalish Elf is a lot more of a useful distinction in Ferelden, Orlais. So we're in Northern Thedas. Things are different up here, and a great example is Ravane. Dalish settlements, they have Dalish settlements within cities integrated into the cities because again, they don't have that same bias, the same distinction. So uh, it's not really a city elf versus Dalish elf thing in a lot of those cases. It's a lot more about how you play into the faction, and in some cases it matters more that you're an elf. In other cases, it doesn't actually matter to the people of that faction. They're just looking for someone who could do the work. A great example, and I'll just very, very light spoilers. Watch is a great example where they just care that you are capable of, executing the duties that you're given. So
This next question we've definitely confirmed a few times today already, but I'm sure there's been a couple of people who've cycled in and out. When will we be releasing detailed information on the full list of accessibility features in the game?
so I mean, as we mentioned, we're not quite ready to talk about them, but we will be diving in them before launch. We want to make sure as many people as possible can enjoy and play the game. So
Yeah, I think we're doing a feature, some kind of blog post on that. But yeah, that'll be a good format where we could be a little bit more in depth.
yeah.
All right, and the final question that I have on my list is about localization. Wooten Smith says, I'd like to hear more about how localization works. What sorts of things have to be changed or adjusted so they make sense in different regions? Do localization teams have to be super careful when they translate to make sure they're not accidentally revealing more than was intended in other versions? I've also always been very curious about accents in other versions. For example, I'm going to butcher this, do the Orlesian or
Or Legion.
Lesian? Oh, Legion. Thank you, John.
That's pretty
Character
good,
voice.
Katie.
I tried.
You got most of the way there.
For example, do the Orlesian character voice actors speak in a French accent in the Japanese version, or a dwarf character speak with an American accent in the French version?
So I'm going to talk broadly about localization, and I'll get a little bit into the accent question. So localization is a thing that we're doing constantly. We're always working with the teams. We have regular syncs with them. And a lot of that is because localization is not just a lot of people think of it as like, yeah, you're just translating. Well, you're not. You're again, there's different things to understand about different languages. They have different rules around grammar. And I will say, I think every writer has at least one story where they wrote kind of a fun double entendre into a conversation, and then they got a ping from someone of the localization team saying, hey, can you very thoroughly explain what you meant there? And that's what I like to describe as being hoist on your own petard, because sometimes you're like, oh, I said this, it was really ribald, and now I don't want to talk to this person who is very seriously and very concernedly looking. She's like, can you please tell us what that means? But yeah, I mean, in general, it's an art form of its own. Different sayings translate differently into different languages. Different metaphors translate differently into different languages, and we always want to make sure that other people, people who are playing this game in every language, have an experience that feels authentic and meaningful, and doesn't feel like it's just kind of a phoned in. We just ran through Google Translate or something. So again, localization is a huge part of what we do. The localization team we have is amazing. They do fantastic work. I love working with them. As far as accents, yeah, we do try to keep some consistency. It's not always going to be a one-to-one, but we do try to say like, okay, so this character, this group of characters needs to sound similar, and they'll find an accent that works with the language that they're trying. Because again, different accents work differently with different languages, and we want to make sure that there's that consistency. So, yeah,
We did it. That's all of
we
our
did it.
questions that we're able to get to today. Wanted to say a quick thanks again to the community for submitting all of these really thoughtful questions. It was a lot of fun going through them and making sure that we were able to give you some new stuff this time around. Yeah, anything you guys want to say before we hop off?
Yeah, can I just say, look, we love being here answering questions for you, but the support, the interest you all show, it really fuels us in the
Mhm.
team. You all are a big part of us being able to make this game what it is, and I really hope we do you proud. So just sincere thank you to everyone.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I've been on this project for a while, and it's been a lot of not getting to talk about it and coyly saying, "I don't know, are we making more new Dragon Age?" So being able to actually have these conversations and give you the details that you want without spoiling the game is a lot of fun. This is genuinely the funnest part of my week. So thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for your time, Corinne and John. And yeah, we have recorded the audio for this, so we're going to turn that into a transcription and put that in the Q&A archive channel, which lives underneath Ask BioWare. That will be coming, in the next couple of days to a week or so. We'll be working away at it as soon as possible. So just let me know if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so
Great.
much, everyone. Have a good Friday, good weekend, and I'm gonna go eat a sandwich. So
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday and happy Sandwich Day.
Bye
thank
bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.